Welcome to Jager's Garage. This is a follow-up on a video we did of turning a 700 Sportsman engine into an 800, and I replaced the 500 that came in this Ranger with that 800. According to the Polaris parts breakdowns, the front motor mount was the same between the 700 Sportsmans and the 700 Rangers. When I tried to use that motor mount, it actually wouldn't work. Where you see the bolt at there, the other mount had the hole about an inch in front of that cross member, so I ended up using the 500 mount and trimming one of the sides off because it was double shear and the 700 is single shear. And then I drilled another hole for the bolt because the bolt spacing was slightly different. On the exhaust, the Y pipe here was actually sticking out this way because it was angled that way slightly, so I just cut the welds and then flipped the Y pipe over, and then it angled down where it needs to. And then I just cut the 90 off of the 500 and welded it to the end of the 700 manifold, and then it connects to the 500 exhaust right here. The 500 and the 700 have the same diameter muffler and everything. On the 500, there's actually an aluminum heat shield like the one back here that carried all the way through, but it won't fit with the 700 because the way the motor mount and everything is. So I left it out and just used the heat wrap. The hoses for the cooling are in pretty much the exact same spot, so I was able to just hook them up. I had to build this mount. The one that came on the 500 had a Y that came off these two brackets and came out to about here and wouldn't work, so I just used some steel plate and bent it up to use those holes and match off of that. The rear carburetor mount had to be shortened. It used to stick out about this far, so I just trimmed it back and drilled new holes and bolted it on. The 700 coil went in where the 500 coil was. I had to grind the spot a little bit wider because it's a little bit bigger. The 700 CDI box, it's right there, and there was an aluminum cover all this as well, but the CDI box for the 700 is also about twice the size of the one for the 500 sat right here, and it wouldn't fit with the bigger coil and the bigger CDI box, so I had to mount it there. The biggest thing with swapping in this motor was actually getting it to run, and it wasn't anything with the motor itself. It was the CDI box here has these two wires, which the 500 only had the black and white one, which just grounded out the CDI box to shut it off. To actually have the 700 run, it has to have a power source fed to it. When the key's turned on, there's a constant 12 volts to that red wire being fed through off of this green wire, which goes all the way up to the key. And then I hooked the black and white one to the old kill switch plug from the 500. I also put an oil pressure sender in it. It's down there, so I can get actual oil pressure off of it. There's a galley down there. That's one of the main oiling galleys, and there's a plug in it. Just took the plug out and put a 90 in, a couple of fittings, and wired that up. And then up here on the thermostat housing, I just drilled and tapped it and put a coolant temperature. The rear motor mount lined up perfectly with the 500 mounts. All the belt covers and everything off the 500 fit on it. I ended up using the 700s because it wasn't cracked, and my 500s was. And then I also used the 700 clutches because now it has engine braking where the 500 had no engine braking. And the breather just ran off to the airbox. The airbox boot actually went from the factory airbox condition right to the carburetor, mounted right up. I just had to pivot it a little bit because the carburetor used to be right about here, and now it's over here. Just a quick shot of the gauges I put in. Up on the dash, they're the Autolite mini gauges. They came in a 3-gauge pod, and they were angled to where they would point towards the driver if you put them under the dash, but I took them out of the pod And then I used the little plastic angle things it had to put it in the dash here so they'll lean towards me so I can see them. We'll fire up real quick for you guys. Over here. Now we'll go for a test drive. One of the next things we'll be working on is a Honda Foreman 400. It's had the top bend changed to be a 450 that's bored 1 millimeter over. And on the last trip I took it out on, the rear U-joint broke. And well, the U-joint didn't break, the yoke broke. I expected it to be a U-joint when I took it apart, but U-joint was fine. This part of the yoke actually broke off here, and you can see how the eyes twisted from when this part broke off. It twisted that one. And in the process, it bent the output shaft. So, waiting for parts to come in for that. And then we'll be pulling in the motor and splitting the case, change the shaft out. And if you like this video and like to see more, please like and subscribe. And you can also follow Jager's Garage on Facebook.